Hi, I'm Mark from Founders&Tips, and today we're talking with Brad Smart, author of the book Topgrading, the proven hiring and promoting method that turbocharges company performance, and also the CEO at Topgrading. Hi, Brad.
Hi, Mark. How are you today?
Fine. Thank you for being with us. Um, can you explain a little bit what's the idea behind Topgrading method and how you develop this method?
Yes. Top grading is really as simple as one, two, three. It doesn't require buying anything. It was a realization I came to shortly after I completed a PhD. I went out in the world and I saw that mishires were occurring everywhere, all over the world. High level jobs, low level jobs, just terrible. I met with just the heads of human resources of just the 100 largest companies in the world. You'd think they'd be best, although frankly, we mostly serve smaller companies and startups, but met with them. A lot of them are clients. They said 75% of the people they hire turn out to be disappointments. They didn't get their money's worth. Actually, what they said was 80% failures in hiring and 75% failures when they promote people. It's terrible. The top graders in the room were sort of bragging. They were beating their chests saying, we have 80% successes. 80% of the people we hire and we promote turn out to be not just good performers, but high performers. This meeting was being held at a Fortune 500 company, and the chairman CEO initially said he'd just be around for a few minutes, but he stayed the whole time, and he could summarize it like this. Hiring is a heck of a burden to every CEO. It is a constant nagging issue because not just the large companies, but small companies, startups, and growth companies suffer from a very high percentage of mishires. And that's what will drag a company down, cause failures. Why? Because they screen people from CVs, resumes, and research shows that almost half of all the CVs and resumes have deliberate falsehoods. So they're wasting a whole lot of time because they can't tell an A player CV from a C player CV because anyone can fudge. The same people who fudge on their resume and CV, they lie in the interviews as well. Why? Because they know they can get away with it. And oddly enough, it's socially acceptable everywhere in the world, Europe and Asia and so forth, to put your best foot forward, to fudge the truth. Why? Because reference checks too often are worthless. And there are, among European countries, some requirements. If you're going to do reference checks and you have to tell the candidate exactly what was said and so forth. Here is what top grading offers. Honesty to replace dishonesty. And the truth serum is as simple as this. I wish I could have patented this. Let candidates know that a final step in hiring is for them to arrange reference calls with their former managers and others you want to talk with. This I hit on, fortunately, in my first year as a professional. It works. A players, high performers, are happy to do this. C players can't do this, won't do this. They wouldn't want you to talk to their former bosses who might not say very nice things about them. So that's principle number one, honesty rather than dishonesty. What happens next in the selection process are interviews. And interviews throughout the world are really very shallow these days. Fortune 500 companies use behavioral or competency interviews that are like this. Mark, can you give me an example of a time you were well organized? It's a bunch of questions where the candidate, you in this case, you get to choose what you're going to say. You can make it up. And it's shallow and not very revealing. That's why the results are so bad. At the end of the process, there's no verification. Every CEO watching this, because the reference checks are with buddies of the candidate, they don't know. They're almost worthless. So the frustration, anyone watching this experiences all the time is I mishire because of dishonesty, shallow interviews, and no verification. Top grading very simply solves those three problems. The truth serum I described assures honesty. Low performers and people who would fake their interviews and did fake their CV and resume, they just drop out. Good. You didn't want to waste time with them anyway. At the end, the A players, the sharp people, are happy to arrange those calls. And they'll do it within 48 hours. And literally 4 or 5 million people have gone through this. It works in European countries. It works everywhere. Sharp people are happy to arrange for those reference calls with people they think are going to say nice things about them. And they do. And what happens in between? The top grading interview. Hey, if people who are staying in the process, they didn't drop out because they were low performers or they fudged the truth, they're going to be honest with you. Then why not ask them about their whole career? See about high and low points of their education days. And then throughout their career, for every job, the top grading interview asks a few basic questions. All right. What were your successes? And how do you achieve those successes? What were your failures? And what, if anything, did you learn from them? What are any key decisions or key relationships we haven't talked about? And why did you leave? And for every single job, full-time job, ask, tell me about the manager you reported to. What were his strengths and weaker points from your point of view? Man, is that useful to know? What's someone you might hire, like or dislike in bosses? Do you fit the pattern that suggests you'll work together well? That's very useful, but here is really the key, the most important thing. What's your best guess? If you were to arrange a reference call with that manager, that manager would tell me were your strengths, your weaker points, and your overall performance. Millions of people have gone through that top grading interview. It's a fun process for A players. They'll tell you the high points, the low points. They'll be beating their chests. They're so proud of their successes. They'll admit failures. All right. They'll tell you that was a mistake. If I had to do it over again, I would do this differently. You know, I took on too many projects. I was spread too thin. So I missed some budgets and some timetables. Then let's see what happened in the next job. Then sharp people will say, I fixed that problem. I learned to take on only what I could do very, very well. I met my budgets, met the timeframes. This is a walk down memory lane for A players that they love. So it's a long interview. It might be 4 hours for a manager. It might be 45 minutes for a receptionist. But it's the same process. And after going through their career right up to the present, of course you ask, what's the ideal job for you? What would you like to be doing 5 or 10 years from now? After that, if you want to move ahead, you and your tandem interviewer, 2 interviewers, don't forget 2 interviewers, want to move ahead, and the candidate wants to move ahead, then you and your tandem interviewer go through your notes and say, who are the people we'd like to talk with? Certainly all bosses within the past 10 years. There were a couple of very interesting projects where she had to work with peers. Let's ask how she did. Let's talk to a couple of those peers. This is a management job. Let's talk to maybe a couple of the A players in the past 3 or 4 years. So you and your tandem partner each conduct maybe 4 of those reference calls, but there's no telephone tag because the candidate will arrange them, say, yes, so-and-so is available this time, and here's their cell number, or put you in touch with their executive assistant who will schedule it. It's easy, but it's very, very useful because after the very in-depth interview, you want to talk to people who will tell you the truth about someone, and that is how it works. Honesty, thoroughness, verification, and it's just amazing. It's 35 years after I got out of graduate school, and nothing has improved for hiring managers since 35 years ago, except top grading, honestly. All the technology that exists helps recruiters. Oh yeah, you can recruit, you can use LinkedIn. It's easy to recruit these days, but But how about the hiring managers? How about the CEOs, who are going to live or die based on the quality of the people they hire? I don't really know of anything. There isn't any test. There's no interview approach that has any case studies like the case studies at www.topgradingcasestudies.com. Big companies, small companies, tech companies, interesting tech companies, by the way, you could ask me about it if you want. But they all say that top grading enabled us to triple our success hiring high performers. And this is quotes, the quotes from the CEO saying the company is definitely more profitable because of top grading. So it's not a cure for cancer. I think it's common sense, but maybe common sense on steroids.
You were talking about basic concept of A players. Could you define what's the concept behind, or how you understand the definition of A players? Because A players in different positions are different depending of the company, the position, etc.
Yeah, yes. Think of A player as high performer. I've asked 65,000 times, when you took that job, tell me about reporting directly to you. Who were your A players, B players, C players? Or translate high performers, adequate performers, low performers. That's simple. And then at the end of the job, how many A's, B's, and C's, and what did you do in between in terms of recruitment and selection and training and coaching and so forth? That's one other set of questions I didn't mention previously. But A players, no matter what the industry is, no matter where it is in the world, and I'll just make the point, just to be a little extreme, say there are a lot of there's a lot of commonality between the CEO and a stocker in a grocery store. Really? No, that is a little bit extreme. But A players, high performers, tend to be hard workers with a high level, low level. All right? They're honest. You can trust them. They work well with people. There just aren't many jobs these days where a jerk can sit in an office and be nasty to people, right? The most important of all competencies, and there are a lot of competencies that are important, dozens, but the most important we've found is resourcefulness. Resourcefulness is the determination to get over or around or through barriers to success. It's not giving up. It's kind of analytical. It's figure out how to succeed, having the confidence to move forward. All right, it's having a lot of ideas, and persistence it's got to be true for a CEO, a senior manager, a mid-manager, low-level manager. For the job, they should be smart enough to be able to figure things out. But more important in a lot of jobs than just how far they went in school or how inherently smart they are is how they use their intelligence. Good judgment. They analyze things. They think about it all night long. They think about it on the weekend, and at all levels. And so we like to highlight resourcefulness as the most important of the competencies for A player. But the other things are important too that I mentioned. Just think A player equals high performer, whether that job is a stocker in a grocery store or someone who's programming or chief financial officer or even CEO.
Apart from the previous performance, there's also an important part of fit with the company about the values the company have and the values the
Yes.
candidate have. How you make this crossing of values to know that this person is going to fit in the culture of the company?
Oh, it's very important, and Top Grading does an excellent job of that. Now I'm going to complicate it just a little bit. With Top Grading, it's important to start out with what we call job scorecard. It's not just a job description that has the different responsibilities and 5 key competencies. Oh, if you possibly can nail down what the numbers are, that person will be held accountable for achieving, okay? So many times, a week ago today, I met with the chairman of a $4.5 billion company who had mishired a CEO. We went through that whole process. And when I looked at the job description, I said, boy, this doesn't tell anything about really the strategy or the problem, the kind of budgets might be, what he might be held accountable for. You tell me that he didn't achieve the numbers. It's too bad the numbers weren't down here. I'll bet that candidate didn't even know what the numbers were to achieve. So let's try to figure out exactly what the job is, describe it, describe if the person achieves these numbers a year from now, that is an A player, that is the high performer. And you share that document with a candidate. And when companies do this, they'll find that pretty sharp people will back away and say, there's too much there. You don't know it, but I think I do. That's 2 jobs, not 1. So I'm not going to set myself up for failure. I encourage you to rethink what this job is, but I'm going to back away. Now back to the culture. Think for every job that the person is asked. Now I'm giving you the more full interview guide. The top grading interview guide has a little bit more than what you did, how you liked it, how you performed, and why you left. So we say, why did you take that job? Which, back it up, why did you leave the previous job? Okay. So you know what they liked about the job, you know what they disliked about the job, but also the culture, relationship with their manager and so forth. And if a person has had 10 jobs, and you get that 10 times, what they liked, what they disliked, how they fit, how they didn't fit, what the problems were. I interviewed someone for a very high level job just a couple of weeks ago. It's a marvelous, marvelous person, fantastic in the industry, incredible reputation. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you what the job was. Most of your CEOs don't have this yet because there's some startups or growing companies. It's general counsel for a big company. You want a general counsel who's going to be with you forever. I've probably interviewed 150 general counsels, but they're typically 20, 30-year people. This guy had changed jobs every 2.5 years, kind of for good reasons, very visible global responsibilities for keeping companies out of trouble. But he's so good, he's always being recruited by search firms, and so he's probably going to be changing jobs every couple of years. What you need in your culture in this job is someone for at least 10 years. That is not a good sign. Mm-hmm. Also, we learned, I'm talking to the owner of the company now, this is a privately owned company, that this nice guy is too nice a guy. You want someone, my client, who's going to go around and in that high level position, like it'd be like a financial officer, but this is general counsel, and influence multiple divisions to do things business-wise. All right, to stay within the law, of course, but my client wanted someone who could offer business wisdom and push people when the owner of the company's not around. This guy is Mr. Nice Guy. He's never pushed anybody on anything. The main reason he's had so many job offers, 2 reasons. One, he's really good and sought out. The other is he's always trying to influence people in his company to do something. They don't listen to him. He's a sweetheart. He doesn't fit in that culture. Okay, a lot of these cultures were pretty tough at the top. So by finding what people like and dislike about jobs, by describing the job, including what the culture is, that helps a whole lot. By getting specifics is really important. For example, in some European countries, the standard is 35 hours, for a work week. And maybe this particular company for upper level managers, they're unusually dedicated. They'll work 40 hours. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it's a company like in the United States where it's 65 or 70 hours. Mm-hmm. Be specific. How many hours? What kind of vacation do you have? We even asked people about outside activities and interests and so forth to see it's a fit. It's not that anyone's bad if they don't fit, but your entrepreneurs frequently, and we've worked with hundreds, have unique personalities, and how they do things is crazy to other people. I'll give you one example. Tony Hsieh is the founder of Zappos. Mm-hmm. And you can read about him. He's very successful. but how he hires people and has anyone can give out a $50 bonus to anybody. He trains people for 6 months and then he offers them $2,000 to go home. And he wants no managers. He eliminated managers last year. And a lot of people would say, I don't think that would fit. So if someone came out of Zappos and expected no managers and work at home if you want and $50 bonuses to anyone at any, I'm making kind of a ridiculous extreme at this, but you can find out by asking the top grading interview questions. What do you like, dislike? Why did you take that job? Why did you leave that job? And then in the references, if you have any concern about whether the person will fit in your culture, describe the culture, as you should have done, by the way, with a candidate, but describe this to the various references. Say, how do you think Chris will fit in a culture like this? So I think he does a really good job. And I think it's fine, by the way, although personality tests are really weak. They help just a little tiny bit. The culture fit tests that are around, they don't cost much money, $20 or something like that. They're okay. They might give you a couple more questions. The top grading interview, though, is what will really identify what this person's like, what their key values are, how they work with people. Are they aggressive? Are they soft? Are they good team players? Were they willing to travel? Maybe the culture in a company is for everybody to get out and meet with our customers, and the person doesn't want to travel so much, or is okay traveling. You'll find all that out with the top grading interview.
What other aspects of the top grading interview are relevant or important to try to apply them on a small business? You at the beginning you talk about two interviewers. Some of the questions you should follow the history employees of the user, of the candidate. What else could be relevant or advisable to the people who are listening to us?
Yes, in the book you mentioned, the third edition of Top Grading, I give away free 1.5 page, somewhat abbreviated top grading interview guide. You stick with that, you'll learn a whole lot. What is unique and a problem to all of us, now I have about 20 people in my company, I've come out of semi-retirement building a company, is hiring people, and hopefully the company's going to grow, right? So I need people who can grow with the company for most positions. No, maybe not the chief financial officer. You already hire someone really good who can accommodate the growth up to that level. So, but it's what we can afford. Versus what you think of as an A player would earn other places. I can't afford to pay this marketing person US dollars $150,000. So what we can do is get an A player, someone who's a high performer at $75,000 or $80,000, but that person will be worth $150,000 when our company doubles or triples in size. Get people on the uptick. The uptick and the uptick. That opens up a related point. You hear about it a bit in Europe, but also in the US, millennials, 18 to 35 years of age, and in 5 years, at least in the US, the majority of employees will be millennials. The research has shown that this whole generation was raised by helicopter parents, buzzing above them, helping them out, help them with the science project, do their homework. It's so extreme now in the United States, Mark, that
it's very similar.
Mommy or daddy will come and say, why did my kid get the job? Your kid is 30 years of age. Why don't you let your kid run his own life? So here's the point. I had an article I wrote, a Top Grading Tips article with Chip Espinoza, who's written a lot of books on millennials, and he made the very good point. CEOs, particularly startup companies, a lot of high tech, you might be one of them, and you're comfortable with kind of the values that say you're not necessarily loyal to an employee. Whoa, wait a minute. Now that you're the CEO, maybe the founder, the owner of the company, you want people who are loyal. Mm-hmm. Just last week, I think it was Goldman Sachs had said they announced a big program to try to hang on to millennials because they're all, the majority are leaving within a couple of years. And they don't want that. So they're doing a lot more to accommodate millennials. And here's the main recommendation to the people who are watching this. As Chip Espinosa said, figure out how to accommodate their special me needs, or you'll end up hiring the C player millennials. So if you think these kids are spoiled, that they're pampered, they expect you to do everything for them. I want a career development plan. I want a job enrichment plan. Every time I do something, I want a pat on the back. Whether I deserve it or not, you might think. So the advice that's generally out there in books and workshops and seminars is, look for ways to sincerely compliment people. Mm-hmm. Distribute that praise and recognition more liberally. All right. You can work out a career development plan with anybody. Go ahead and do it. Most companies don't do it, large and small. Mm-hmm. What would you like to be doing 5 years from now? If they change jobs on the average every 2 years, Goldman's looking out 4 or 5 years. What will it take to keep you 5 years? And finally, ask them. Have that cup of coffee, maybe even every month with everybody in your small company. Have the coffee. Frequently ask, how are you doing? Are you having fun? Are you challenged? Are you learning, growing? What else can I do as your manager that would help you contribute more to the company, but also contribute to your happiness and success? We got to do those things. And in small companies, top grading has to take in consideration millennials, because soon they'll be the majority.
We need to adapt to that, sure. Also, top grading method can be applied for promotions, internal promotions, and to develop people inside the company. How we can apply that in a company?
Yes, that's a lot of what I and several other top grading professionals do. We assess teams in companies. Companies growing, and do I have the talent now? I wonder, are these people high potential? Will they be able to grow and be in those high-level jobs 5 years from now? If not, I have to think about bringing in others. If you have managers in your company, then the same top grading method works, except one little benefit. The reference checks are with internal people. So suppose you have, 50 people in the company. You could do it yourself, maybe pair off with one other manager, and then interview someone in the company. It's a top grading interview. They're not applying necessarily for a specific job, but if they are, identify the job. So there's, someone who's a very good salesperson, but is this person likely to succeed as my first vice president of sales? Boy, that's a really important question, because usually the best salesperson is a lousy leader, but sure, you put them through the process and you ask, high points and low points, and know whether this person is willing to help you recruit, likes to coach people, or does this sales rep like to grab all the business for himself? Okay. And you're not quite sure because the person does have a reputation. So I think it'd be really smart to talk with others who work with this sales rep inside the company, and so the references are easier to do. They're inside the company. When you get to be a little bigger, then what typically happens is everyone in management is expected to do it twice a year. They go to a different part, a different store, a different region. Mm-hmm. They fly in, they do the top grading interview with one other person. They talk with bosses, peers, and subordinates, and they go home and report. They prepare a report. And then later they sit down with the individual and help create a development plan. But exactly what's used. I mentioned earlier something that is maybe shocking. These very, very sophisticated companies, when I met with heads of human resources, said that 75% of the time when they promote people, turns out to be a problem. They disappoint. They did not work out. What? And how they go about promoting them is kind of crazy to me. If a person is a super high performer, well, that's enough. You put them on the succession plan and then they say they're a candidate for promotion with no one seriously talking about them, talking with them to see if they have the ability, even the interest to really do a good job if they get a promotion. So I'd say, yeah, use the top grading process for external hires and for promotions as well. It's exactly the same process.
Mm-hmm. This method comes from your experience as a consultant. You have several business cases on your website. Everybody can check. Could you explain a little bit some of this experience, some of this business case, to let people understand a little bit what's the benefits of applying top grading?
Yes, at www.topgradingcasestudies.com, there are quotes by the CEOs. Mm-hmm. And there's a chart. You go there. The first thing you see is a master chart, the name of the company. General Electric happens to be a big one. Mint.com, Silicon Valley, is a small one. And it shows the average improvement from 26% A players hired to 85%. Mm-hmm. And every CEO says the company is more profitable because of it. And they're asked their advice. What's your best advice to anyone considering top grading? Mm-hmm. Their answer is, read the book and don't cut corners. Don't cut corners means what? Use two interviewers. Two interviewers enabled GE as the first company to embrace this, to improve from 50% to 90% A players hired and promoted. For small companies, it's even more important because mishires are potentially lethal to a smaller company. Mint.com was founded by a couple of people. Aaron Patzer was the main founder, mm-hmm. and he's one of the case studies. And he said, I top graded. I only had 40 people in the company, but 36 were A players. If I hadn't top graded, almost certainly we would have failed. And then he has an interesting statement. We didn't fail. And we sold Mint.com to Intuit for $170 million. That's a good reason to top grade. The others, another one is it's just more fun to come to work every day in a small/growth company with A players around you who are resourceful. They're thinking good ideas. If there's a problem, and we all have problems, they figure out how to solve the problems and move ahead. If you have B and C players, and typically managers have 25% A's, 50% B's, and 25% C's. And guess what? You know this. Everyone watching this knows this, but you know this too, Mark. The A players spend most of their time not thinking creatively about how to build the business, but covering for the B and C players, fixing the problems the B and C players have created, and thinking of the obvious things that they didn't think of to prevent problems. But flash ahead, as I've seen for over 3 decades now, when managers top grade and they have an A team with almost all A players, they have a lot more fun. They don't have to kill themselves working so many hours. And they're successful and they grow, their careers are better, their companies are better. There was an ad years ago for Coca-Cola that said, everything goes better with Coke. Well, for managers, particularly CEOs, everything goes better with top grading.
So one can think that it's more expensive if you are hiring all in your company's A players. You need to pay them more. It's going to be more expensive in salary.
It's usually cheaper. Let me. I'm going to say things that sound contradictory at first. Mm-hmm. To your point, anyone say, if I want the talents of that marketing manager I was referring to earlier that fit the profile for people earning $150,000, then I need to pay $150,000, right? Yes, maybe. But maybe with recruitment, which is pretty easy today with LinkedIn and so forth, you can get someone on the upswing at $80,000. But here's a bigger point. Say when you get to have, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 people in the company, maybe you have a department manager, let's say a head of sales, and 5 sales reps. I've done this survey 1,000 times. Typically, 2 at the most are A-player sales reps. 2 are, I don't know if they're bad enough to fire, but they're really not as good as the A-players. And 1 C player, and I'm going to give that person maybe a few more months, maybe next year, but probably have to replace the person. If you just have average success top grading and you have 4 A players, they'll easily do the job of the 5 people. We hear generally throughout the business world, rather than 12 people reporting to me, I not only can get by with 8, but if at least 7 of the 8 are A players, they do more and they do better than the 12. So my total payroll is lower when I have A players, high performers at every level, from a data entry clerk, just to make that point, or but A teams have fewer people and are much more productive. Just check out at www.Topgrading Case Studies. Argo CEO says it. Many other CEOs imply it. We were able to cut the number of people we have in the company, get far better performance because the fewer people are A-player people.
Wow. And also, when you are hiring very junior profile, it also applies top grading method. As you don't have a background to analyze, how you analyze that the history of this user, the user candidate?
Well, I fortunately have an answer because my clients are smarter than I am. For many years, literally 20 years, I figured top grading only works for experienced managers. I haven't told you why yet, but here's why the top grading interview works as management, works as magic. You see the patterns of how people evolved over time, how they built their strengths, their experience, their competencies, how they improved as leaders, how they work better with people. You see these patterns over their whole career. So now, when you get up to the present, you've just finished talking about the current job, it's not so difficult. It's very easy to project how the person will do in the next 2, 3, 4 years. So my assumption was that, for those, 2 or 3 years out of college, they don't have anything to extrapolate from. There aren't any patterns. They've only had 2 jobs. Oh boy. My client said, Brad, top grading does work. When we hire, say, young people right out of college, 2/3 of them are gone within 3 years. Not so with top grading. 2/3 are with us after 3 years. We've asked the questions about their education years, what were high points, low points, any work experiences. We learned something from that, for maybe even high school, definitely for college. And with the first job right out of college, we learn about, because they learned about themselves. They were figuring themselves out. They have maybe one more job. Now the pattern is taking shape for what they like, for what they're good at, what their work habits will be, how they'll work with people, how they'll succeed. Sure, they're young enough, they're going to make more mistakes, but frankly, to double the tenure on the job for people recently out of college, to double that from 1 year to 2 years, that is pretty big. It's worthwhile using top grading. It's a shorter interview, though. If you're talking about someone who maybe a candidate for sales rep, it's not a 4-hour interview. Sales manager, that's a 4-hour interview. That will move by very quickly. The person's had 12, 15 years of experience. For the person with 2 jobs, it's probably a 1 hour, hour and 15-minute interview going through their high school, their college, job 1, job 2, what their plans are for the future. Answer any questions they have. Okay, that's the top grading interview, maybe an hour and a half. Of course, do the reference checks, and the reference checks will be with their first job, for sure, But sometimes people ask, well, what about the current job? What if we went after them on LinkedIn? They're not looking for the job. Put them through the top grading interview and they say, whoa, I don't want to arrange a call with my present boss, maybe the sales manager, doesn't know I'm looking. The answer to that is, who has left the company that we could talk with at your level or at a higher level? Mm-hmm. A players always have a couple of people that they trust, will not tell their boss they're looking for a job. So it works even under those circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And a final advice for entrepreneurs that are watching us, how they can improve hiring, just applying top grading. What's the first steps to consider to apply top grading?
Yeah, I'd love to get you. If I were on a plane with you, and this has happened plenty of times, where some person is looking at what I'm doing, and oh, you're that top grading guy, huh? Well, let me tell you about my situation. So I give them a little consulting, So we don't do workshops regularly in Europe yet. We have people in Europe who do them for client companies. Come to the U.S., go through a workshop. Hey, or do what Aaron Patzer did. He just bought the book and he figured it out on his own, and he was smart. I mean, he really read that book. Even though he doesn't read many books, you really read that book, and you're probably advising people, if you're starting a company, your startup, you're high tech, you should read stuff more than you probably really want to. But then just pair off with at least one other person who's smart, has some business savvy. Maybe for startups, maybe it's not someone in the company. Pay him a little bit. Be your tandem partner. Do top grading interviews, but do them with at least one other person. You'll love it. It's fun. One of you will take more notes than the other. You'll forget a question. Your partner will ask the question. Take my book and take the interview guide right out of the book. The two of you use it. So step one, here's the final advice. Tell all candidates the first time you communicate with them that a final step in hiring is for them to arrange reference calls with former managers and others. If you only do that, then next year you'll have a better success hiring. Number three is at the end of the top grading interview with a tandem partner, do those reference calls. And in between, pair off with someone who's sharp, use the interview guide, ask the questions. You'll love it. You'll learn so much more than you ever have. And the A players you're interviewing will like it. And you'll probably be interviewing a lot of really sharp people, because the low performers and those who would never be able to get their bosses to do reference calls, they have dropped out. Mm-hmm. So this can work. So use the 1, 2, 3 approach, and email me and tell me how your better hiring has made your life better. I'd appreciate that.
Thank you a lot, Brad, for your time and for writing your book and sharing your experience and your methodology. It's critical to improve hirings, and I hope everybody or more people every time more people use it. Thank you.
All right. And it's been nice talking with you. It's been a lot of fun. Hope it works for the people who are watching this. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.